Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to the CoronaSphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, calling you from the plane of infinite despair here. I hope everybody's doing well. We're back with another episode of a show that I'm trying to maintain, at least through the early part or the worst part of this pandemic lockdown. So many different things to talk about, and I've tried to decide to make sure that if I didn't have anything particularly fresh to say, I'd keep it down to a minimum. But as it turns out, I do have some interesting perspective on things. Yesterday, no, hi everybody, by the way, who are watching live. Yesterday, I mentioned the idea of two timers that might be useful to think of a way to think of the situation we're in now as a set of timers, one of which the longer it runs, the better in terms of lives, and the other timer, the longer it runs, the worse in terms of economic damage. And I got an article sent to me, actually, as in the form of a link to a video by a very, very good friend of mine, somebody who I have nothing but the highest regard for, just one of the most remarkable people I've ever met, ever. I met him through Burt Rutan, my friend Burt Rutan, and his name is Brent Regan, and Brent is without question the smartest guy I've ever met. He is he is an astonishing individual. Brent's an engineer, entrepreneur, built a extremely complex aircraft, Lancer 4 pressurized. He built his own hangar to build the airplane in. He's got his own shop, which he built on his own. He built his own runway, built his own airport on his property. His daughter wanted a house for her graduation from college presidents, so they decided to go out and build their own house with in-floor heating, and it's the most astonishing thing I've ever seen. He's one of the most astonishing people I've ever met, Brent Regan. Unless he's watching now, in which case he's just kind of some guy I don't think too highly of. No, he's an absolutely remarkable man. And Brent emailed me a few days ago with a video about a particular invention. And I'm going to play that for you in its entirety. It's about 3 or 4 minutes long. And the reason I want to play it is because it shows how much hidden capacity we have in this country for dealing with this crisis as a nation of individuals, businessmen, engineers, entrepreneurs, and all the rest. The U.S. has a resource in terms of, it's not just a question of brain power. There's brains all over the world. There's lots and lots of intellectual capability all over the world. The one thing that America seems to have that no one else has is the ability for individual people to simply go out there, set up a business, and start making extraordinary products. Now, what I'm about to show you is not what Brent does in terms of his primary income. He's an engineer, but he did show me the prototype, and I don't want to just give it away. I'll just let you watch the video of what he's been working on. And he was working on this for several years ago, and I thought it might be of some use to somebody I know who's very close to me, who has severe respiratory problems, and he offered it in terms of that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to play this video for 3 or 4 minutes. In it, Brent has a line. It's just a throwaway line, but it's an important throwaway line. And when we come back from this video, I'd like very much to be able to discuss what not just his particular device that he's going to show you, but also the implications of raising the bar. We talked about from the beginning that this entire quarantine issue, this entire social isolation is designed to keep the number of cases low enough, stretch out the exposure time so that we don't get these peaks that overwhelm the flat line of our medical capabilities. Here's how many intensive care beds we have. Here's how much medical care we can administer at any given time. So instead of having all of these cases cluster so quickly that it immediately blows out our ability to deal with not only with the COVID-19 cases, but if the hospitals are absolutely stocked with COVID-19 cases, there's any number of other medical emergencies that they won't be able to deal with. So we've been talking as a nation and as a world from the beginning about flattening the curve. And And just watching this video from Brent, I realized that this is a two-variable equation. In other words, we're doing everything we can, including causing enormous damage to the economy, but trying to flatten that curve down, to press it down so that it stays below our capability to deal with this as a medical issue. And that's the variable that everybody's been working on. And that's the variable everybody's been talking about, but it's a two-variable problem. The other thing that you can do concurrently is you can not only flatten the curve, you can also raise the bar. You can raise the medical capability of the country. The more medical capability we have, the more cases that we can endure with favorable outcomes. So I'm going to just play this, and I have been crushed on time, so please forgive me if I need to do a quick adjustment on it. I'm going to go back just for a moment to the thumbnail. I'm going to load this thing up real quick. It's going to take all of 10 seconds, and if I could have done it before I started the show, I would have, but just give me one moment here, and I will get that set up directly.
Hi, I'm Brent, and I'd like to give you the facts about ventilators. Now, I'm not a pulmonologist, but I have designed ventilators for clients, including ones like this. Here's the problem. People think that ventilation means squeezing a bag of air into a patient and then releasing it and letting the air come back out and repeating that process. That works fine for a healthy lung, but if you have a sick lung, which is wet with mucus, the little alveoli sacs are stuck closed, and the pressure it takes to open them is greater than the pressure it takes to rupture them. So what you end up doing, if you're not very, very careful, is a thing called ventilator-induced lung injury, or VILI, and that can be fatal in and of itself. So if you're pressure ventilating somebody who has a sick lung, you need to be an experienced ventilator technician. And in a crisis, we don't have enough of those ventilator technicians, even if we had all the ventilators we need. What we need is a technology which is intrinsically safe and can't cause that problem. Fortunately, about 40 years ago, a doctor, Forrest Bird, up in Sagal, invented just that technology. He called it the phasotron, and it's a Bernoulli device which has a venturi, which induces airflow into the lung without creating pressures that can injure it. I've got a phasotron right here. It's driven by a pneumatic signal, and it draws in extra air from the ambient environment and sends it to the patient. Now, this can be to the patient via a mouthpiece, or it can be a mask, or if the patient is intubated, it can be in their intubation tube. And this device here is the key. This is a production device. They're making thousands of these right now. Now, usually the machine that's used to drive something like this, a ventilator, is a big complex device like that. And it gives you all kinds of parameters you can set to treat all kinds of patients. But you don't need something that complicated. In fact, all you need is something very, very simple. And I've breadboarded it here on the bench to show you. You have a pressure regulator. You have an adjustable pneumatic oscillator. You've got a meter which can measure the pulse rate and pressures, and the phasotron. That's it. So I'm going to show you right now. I'm going to take an analog of a lung, which is basically just a bag. I'm going to put it on the end of the phasotron, and I'm going to connect this system to a pressure line from an air compressor. Voila, instant ventilation with just these four simple components. I can adjust the speed, and I can adjust the pressure. The advantage of this system is the parts are simple, they're easy to deploy, you can make thousands of them in a very short period of time. The problem isn't the technology though. The problem is that this particular configuration is not FDA approved, even though all the pieces, all the technology is in medically approved ventilators right now. So we don't have a technology problem. We've got a government regulation problem in order to have enough of these ventilators to make sure that everybody who needs one gets one. Now, I've contacted Congressman Fulcher, and I've put him in touch with a company that makes these systems, Percussion Air, up in North Idaho. And the president of Percussion Air has been put in touch with the Health and Human Services Department so they can start working on this. This has just been in the last couple of hours. Now, don't call Percussion Air or ask them for information. They're very busy addressing this problem right now. But it's quite possible that the solution to this nationwide, really worldwide pandemic can be had right here in North Idaho. I'll keep you posted when I hear more. Thank you.
Yeah, that guy's a good friend of mine. He's a brilliant man. Let me just elaborate on one or two things in the video, just to recap, and then I want to talk about the larger issue that this presents. As Brent pointed out, the problem with traditional respirators is that you have to apply pressure, and the areoli are basically clogged with mucus, and that the amount of pressure it takes to open that areoli without rupturing it is exceedingly difficult. And he's right. It's not just a question of needing respirators. You need people who can adjust those pressures. But this pulse respirator is able to operate at much lower pressures because it's putting a mechanical pulse that's actually slowly opening up those clogged areoli, and it's not forcing them with one enormous constant pressure wave. It's just slowly, basically just tapping them open, and as they open, it basically adjusts itself because the pressure, the overpressure, is not very great. Now, he mentioned that Dr. Bird had worked on this, and the Dr. Bird he's talking about is Dr. Forrest Bird. And if you know anything at all about the medical profession, you've heard of Dr. Forrest Bird. He died just a short time ago. He also lived up in the same neck of the woods as Brent does. Brent worked with him on the prototype. Forrest Bird has saved hundreds of millions of lives, would be my guess. Because Forrest Bird was the guy who put together the first real hospital respirator. It's called the Bird units, is what people were talking about. Almost every hospital today is using a respirator that was designed from Forrest Bird. So when Forrest Bird, when Brent says had been working with Dr. Bird on it, not just working with some guy, he's working with the guy who designed the respirators that are in use all around the world in virtually every hospital in the world. Those bellows and all those, these are Bird units, and so the medical aspect of it is coming from arguably, in fact, probably inarguably, the most unimpeachable source there is in the country in terms of mechanical ventilation. So that's the Forrest Bird part. The Brent Regan part is the construction of it, and the save the world part is entirely encapsulated in the relationship between these two guys. If you noticed, Brent hooked up that regulator to a regular high pressure line. It wasn't connected to oxygen. He didn't have to work any of those valves. He didn't have to worry about any of the feedback, all the stuff he mentioned that traditional respirator technicians need to do. He didn't. He plugged it in to his compressed air line, which is the same compressed air line that runs his shop. At least that's what it looked like to me. It might have been oxygen, but certainly it was just a plug in, go. And that pulse rate and the pulse duration and all the rest of that stuff is easily adjustable, and my understanding of it, which is somewhat limited, is that it is essentially, you never want to call anything foolproof or anything, but it is a far safer and far more foolproof form of ventilation than what we're missing. Now, this is the point that I would really like to make, because as I've said before, and I'll probably have to say every episode, what I'm hoping these shows will be for the duration that we do them is they'll be a source of good news that's reliable good news and verifiable and so on. And it occurred to me, because Brent mentioned in that video, that this kind of a setup is so simple, so easy to replicate. All of the parts are essentially just off-the-shelf parts. And furthermore, as he said, even though that particular respirator is not FDA approved, all of the parts that go into it are FDA approved. I will put the link to the video at the bottom of this, and I should have mentioned that at the beginning. So I'll put the link to the video on the YouTube post and on the Facebook page. But this is the kind of thing that that it seems to me that America does in a way that no one else can. And while we need to be working on respirators as much as possible and producing as many of the traditional respirators, again, designed by Dr. Bird, as we can, this kind of thing is breakout technology because it is exceedingly simple. It can be manufactured very, very quickly. It can be manufactured in bulk using off-the-shelf components that you go down to Home Depot or a hardware supplier or something and just simply buy. And the ability to mass produce these things and plug it into a compressed air source, that's what it looked like to me. I mean, it looked to me, and I know if I'm wrong about this, I'll be hearing about it shortly, but it appeared to me that this is something that you could probably just plug into like a shop compressor or something to provide, compressed air tank or something. The main thing is to get air into the lungs. And when we talk about flattening the curve and all of the economic damage that we're taking to flatten the curve, which again is saving lives, no question about that. What Brent is doing, and what many other American entrepreneurs are doing, and people around the world as well, is they're trying to think of ways to not just flatten the curve, but to raise the bar that the curve is being flattened to remain under. That bar is the ability of us to maintain adequate medical attention to the people that need it. And when we talk about exceeding that number, when we talk about flattening the curve so that it doesn't go through that horizontal line, that line consists of a lot of things, but mostly it consists of physical beds that are attached to physical respirators. And if we could take a significant number of the patients who are not in the greatest danger, you'd keep the hospital beds for those who are really in the greatest danger. But if people simply needed help breathing, ventilator help breathing, in other words, if there was a ventilator available for everybody, a significant number of those patients who might otherwise have to be hospitalized for days or weeks could be treated at home. They could simply be treated at home because these components would be relatively simple, relatively inexpensive. And look, I don't know to the degree that this particular device would help. It will certainly help to some degree, and it might make life-saving changes to thousands or tens of thousands of people's lives. But it's not even really the point I'm trying to make in this particular episode. The point I'm trying to make here is that this is a two-variable equation. And I didn't realize that until I saw Brent's video earlier today. It is a two-variable equation. We not only can flatten the curve, we can raise the bar that the curve has to stay under. And I think we should be thinking very, very heavily along those lines. And again, this, as in the case of the therapies that we mentioned 2 shows ago, this is where the great unknowns lie, the great opportunities for the country and the world. This is where they lie. They lie not in things that we know, the known knowns. We know how to make vaccines. We know it takes a long time to make a vaccine, and we know that vaccines have to be tested so they don't kill the people that you're administering them to. We know that vaccines have to be mass produced, and we know what we know. And that's why we talk about flattening the curve, because we have knowns about what our healthcare capabilities are in America and around the world. What's unknown is how much capacity is out there among people of the genius, the practical knowledge, the sheer plain, I'm going to sit down and build one because I can, American know-how that Brent Regan absolutely epitomizes, and why I hold him in such enormously high regard. This is not a theoretical thing. It was a theoretical thing. And then Brent spent some time with Dr. Bird and figured out what it was Dr. Bird needed in terms of the medical side. And Brent just sat down in his shop and just built it, kind of for fun, because he can. How many other devices are out there? How many other therapies? How many other treatments? How many other solutions to this problem? lie out there right now, and not only lie out there, but how many other enormous contributions are basically, how many people capable of making those kind of contributions are standing there in the back of the room just waving their hands and jumping up and down trying to get people's attention. They're not doing this for profit. I don't know what the situation. Certainly you have to sell them. I don't know what they cost, but as you can see, these are off the shelves valves and components, and this is the time where we have to really seriously get draconian about, not about trashing the economy. We got to get draconian about raising that bar, because the more we can raise that bar of our medical capability, the faster we can let people get back to some semblance of work, and the faster we can restart the economy. So I think that's just really a powerful source of hope for everybody. There are thousands and thousands. I wish there were millions. There might, in fact, be, but there are certainly tens of thousands of Brent Reagans out there, small businesses, and engineers and so on, who are capable of doing this. And now is the time to get past this. Well, we're going to have to let people die because it's not been FDA approved yet. Look, I completely understand that a test should be run. I get that. You can't just toss it out there, because not everybody out there has Brent's engineering skill. Not everybody out there consults with the world's leading respiratory expert in terms of mechanical ventilation to get the design done. I understand that the system has to be tested, but I don't think it needs to be tested for 2 years or 3 years. And President Trump seems to understand this. And I think that one of the things that we should be doing to make up for the late start that we and virtually every other country in the planet got on this is we've got to very quickly get all of this red tape out of the way and have a very simple, very streamlined method for giving a basically a go no go on any particular piece of technology or any kind of therapy that can help us raise the bar. Somebody pointed out, it's Ted Yantis, who said, I don't work on medical field manufacturing because of the need of tort reform. In other words, if I read him right, he's capable of doing manufacturing in the medical field, but he doesn't want to do it. There's no reason to do it. It could destroy him because of this abundance of lawsuits, this just overwhelming abundance of lawsuits. I don't know what the answer to this is legally, but I can tell you what the answer would be for me. The issue that's being raised is simply this. Let's say that we were to do this, or we were to take Ted's inventions or any other of these inventions that are currently non-certified. What we need to do is essentially put all of that red tape aside and treat this as if we actually a nation of adults. And what I mean by that is this. Simple tests to make sure that this doesn't cause people's lungs to explode. There's no question you need some very simple kind of a thing like that. But in terms of the 3 years of testing or so on, my attitude towards this is, if I am a COVID-19 patient and I'm having difficulty breathing, and I am given a choice to use a technology that is given to me and clearly made clear to me that this is a non-certified technology, it seems to be working. We've had good results with it, but it's not FDA approved. You can either get it or not. You decide. Sign a release form, and that release form ought to be absolutely ironclad. One of the things that Britt and I have in common, one of the reasons we met him, is because we're both good friends with a person who's an absolute hero of both of ours, and that's Burt Rutan. And Burt Rutan has given wings to hundreds of thousands of people who'd never be able to fly before, because Burt Rutan designs extremely safe, extremely efficient, unusual, pretty, all kinds of lovely adjectives. Burt Rutan designs airplanes, and he allows them to come in the range of just about anybody if you're willing to build it. And it's thousands of hours. People generally say that to build your own airplane is going to take you probably 1.5 wives to do. But with all of that said, and the reason I'm saying all of this, Brent Regan and this solution, among many solutions, I think we should look at this exactly the way that we look at experimental aviation in this country. You may think that has nothing to do with the COVID-19 crisis. On the contrary, I think it has everything to do with this medical crisis. The experimental aircraft category is very simple. Through some almost inconceivable throwback to the original freedoms built into this country, the Federal Aviation Administration has agreed to a set of legal standards that apply to experimental airplanes. And these standards are well, let me rephrase that. What am I trying to say here? Here's what I'm trying to say. If you are going to fly an aircraft that you built yourself, and I think this model applies perfectly. The more I think about it, the better I like it. So let's say I want to build my own airplane. You would think in a free country, you just go out and build your own airplane and fly it or not fly it. And if it crashed, well, that's your problem. You're the one who did it. There's a case to be made about the public health. There's a case to be made about flying an aircraft over a populated area and having parts come off of it. That's a legitimate public concern. But that is a minimal risk. So let me explain to you how it works in aviation. An experimental aviation aircraft is built by the home builder. The people that supply the kits, when kits are available, supply 49% of the total effort put into that airplane. It cannot exceed 49%. How they get these numbers is you get the idea. But the theory behind it is sound. What the FAA says is if you want to build your own airplane and you do more than 50% of the construction, then you are the primary builder on it. You're responsible for it. They don't just simply say, go on and fly the thing wherever you want to. In order to fly an experimental aircraft, the design doesn't have to be certified. That's where all the money's saved. Millions of dollars to certify an airplane, 10 years to do it, and that price goes into the cost of the airplane. A Cessna 172 Skyhawk new is something like $300,000 today because of certification. And by the way, Cessna said that if they would just limit, not get rid of the legal hurdles, just if they would limit the tort exposure to whatever, 12 years instead of eternity, they'd go back to building single-engine airplanes, and they did, so they did. But what happens in the case of an experimental airplane is an FAA inspector, an A&P, a person who's an airframe and power plant, and furthermore a certified inspector, will come out and he will look at your particular airplane and he will give it a very thorough 3-hour inspection. He's going to look at everything. He's going to make sure that this airplane that you've built appears to be airworthy. And if it is, he will sign that airplane off. And then you will have to fly that airplane for 40 hours within a limited radius of the airport. I want to say it's a 5-mile radius, but I don't remember. It might be 40. I honest to God don't remember. But you have to fly 40 hours essentially within gliding distance of the airport. And after you've done that, then you can go out there and fly this plane wherever you want to. And here's the critical part of it. One of the requirements necessary if you're going to fly an experimental airplane is that the word experimental has to be visible in big letters. They specify how big they have to be, and they have to be visible as you enter the aircraft so that if you're taking a passenger with you, that passenger has to see the word experimental before they get into it. And furthermore, there has to be a placard visible to the passenger that says, practically got this verbatim, this aircraft is certified in the experimental category. It is not certified by the Federal Aviation Administration. It essentially says fly at your own risk. And to me, this is a perfect balance between what we can do, what we should do, and what we must do. The experimental aircraft category is to me a very good balance between public safety and private freedom, and it treats people like adults. It basically says if you want to build an aircraft that you built yourself off of an established design and it appears to be airworthy, then we'll let you fly it for 40 hours, and if nothing falls off of it in that time, you can fly it anywhere you want to. And if you kill yourself in it, that's your fault. You made the decision. When you get in the back of an experimental airplane, you are advised of the risk, and then as an adult, you make a risk-reward decision, and you live with the consequences either way. And I've had 1,000 hours of flying in experimental aircraft, and I love them. and millions of people would not be able to fly without them. So why don't we do that with these medical technologies, and why don't we do it fast? Why don't we use that as a model and simply say that for the duration of this pandemic at least, we will certify medical devices in the experimental category. We will do a test to make sure that the device is obviously doing what it says it's going to do. We're going to forego as an emergency procedure this 2 or 3 years or whatever of testing and so on. And to indemnify the manufacturers, we basically include words to the effect of experimental on the side of this thing, and in order to get it and use it, you have to sign a consent form that says you'd rather take a chance on this experimental device than die because you can't get to a ventilator. This is not a difficult decision to make. It's just not. This is an easy decision to make, and we should be making them. And I understand the need for the FDA. I understand that these products need to be tested. One of the reasons why we can go into a convenience store and open a candy bar or open anything or buy a sandwich off the shelves and eat it with perfect peace of mind is because we have testing and we have standards in place. But this is a national emergency now. And we are talking about the ability to harness private enterprise and significantly raise the bar that we have to remain under. The higher we can get that bar, the more we can unthrottle the economy, the more people can get back to work as early as possible, and most importantly, more people will come out of this infection alive than would have otherwise. That's the bottom line. Everybody wins, nobody loses. It's good for everybody. It's good for the patients, it's good for the economy, it's good for the inventors. Nobody's gouging anybody in cases like this that I can see. And best of all, when it's all over, when the pandemic is over, one of the many things we may get out of this is a culture that takes a much better look at risk and reward, goes back to the idea that adults should be able to decide if they want to save their own lives using certain methods or not, as long as they're fully appraised of the risks. And maybe we can go to a world where this kind of emergency harnessing of the will of the brains and the ingenuity built into the American system. Maybe we'll go to a world where this kind of thing is not so throttled as it is now. Maybe a quick burst of inventiveness and ingenuity and cutting unnecessary red tape will show us what we're capable of doing when we don't have a killer virus to fight across the face of the planet. That'll do it for this edition of the CoronaSphere Lounge, which is made possible by very, very small number of extremely dedicated people who pay $9.95 a month in order to keep these messages coming. If you're one of these people that gets any comfort out of this, we would certainly love to have you. There's a chance to donate on Patreon on our YouTube page. But mostly, we survive by membership at billwhittle.com. So if you would like to go there and become a member, become a citizen producer, we would certainly love to have you, and we certainly need you. So that'll do it for this edition of the CoronaSphere Lounge, again, made possible by our paying members. Hope this has given you more hope. That's our job, is to provide hope for people that is founded on reality, on verifiable statistics, and some degree of perspective. We are sitting on unimaginable opportunities and brain power and enthusiasm. All we have to do is just get out of those people's way. Let's just get out of their way and let them do what they do, which is create prosperity and save lives. We'll see you tomorrow on the CoronaSphere Lounge.